So it's always been the Chambers band, but we don't have to keep saying it. We've been saying it for, once again, you can get rid of anything you want. The only thing that Craig wanted us to make sure we talked about today was the forum for next week. I can type fast if you want me to type anything else. Got it. Yes, and he likes that idea. He said we would worry about it next week because yeah, and then I'm going to make it so that Craig will be a panelist. I'm hoping at one point that I could just, I don't need to be on, but I sign in as the host. He could technically do that, so I could do that for him. I could get it all set up, and then he could just start the meeting. But then throughout the meeting, there are little things that I do if people raise their hands and things like that. I just wish I wasn't on a little cube. So we did change something today when we stop our video now.
Oh, there you go. Very nice. I haven't been able to figure out how to do that on mine.
It's in your profile.
I know, but I can't get the picture the right size. Every time I take a picture of my phone.
Send me a picture and I'll make it the right size for you.
Oh, really?
And then you can upload it.
I'm gonna put my Red Dog logo in there.
Yeah.
And I can't seem to figure it out.
You can text me and I will do it for you. No problem. Yeah, I took both of our headshots and took out the backgrounds and put us on the same color as our.
Yeah.
Hey, Andy.
Hey, how's it going, guys? We're just practicing the share screen here. So let me just.
Oh,
Hey,
it says host has disabled share screen for us. So we've got a little.
on.
And then February hitting, and then everything was different. Yeah, we definitely got involved early on. We're obviously an operation that deals with sanitation a lot, and so we had a lot of supply chain capabilities. So while we didn't produce hand sanitizer, we were able to procure it in large quantities, and that's really kind of the beginning of our involvement. I think that's one thing that's remarkable about where we live here in Alaska is that we are engaged as a community, and we really do look out and want to help as a community, helping our neighbors, and at the same time, obviously helping ourselves. So the long journey of our involvement with COVID-19 really started realizing that we have surface sanitizers, hand sanitizers, that other businesses were having a difficult time procuring that, especially with the mandates coming out. So we created forums not only for businesses to be able to get 1 gallon jugs. We also worked with Department of Corrections, Department of Elections, the State Health and Social Services Procurement Office. We even got into making crazy things like viral transport media so that people can get swabbed and not have the state all of a sudden have a supply chain issue in that particular area. We do a lot of microbiological work at the brewery. We don't do anything in COVID-19 realm, but we do have a lot of expertise in that area. However, I think in that whole process, it became pretty obvious that the testing bottleneck that we were facing in our community was one of the impediments. So I became fairly involved in a group that really has been working on trying to bring more rapid testing technologies here to the city. And in that process of those discussions, I became somewhat of a layman's expert in regards to what's involved. Interestingly enough, in trying to contact and create maybe platforms that the brewery could use to augment our testing, it became pretty obvious that there are misconceptions in regards to how do we get ahead of this pandemic. And I guess the old cliche, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, really comes down to what Eric just mentioned. Wear your mask, social distance, wash your hands. That's the preventative side of it. The pound of cure in this instance, and what we're talking about is testing. That's a reactive. Right now, you're reacting to an outbreak. And so it became pretty obvious in our discussions and in the process of learning about this need to be proactive. We came across a company called Calico that offered more of a monitoring and proactive approach. They integrated not only the testing platforms that could help with an outbreak, but they emphasized that really what it's all about is maintaining an awareness on an individual basis and as a company to sit there and be able to proactively control the possibility of COVID coming into the workplace. So what we ended up doing is investigating and trying to see what would be entailed. And so I'm going to sit there and share with you essentially a promotional piece, really, I would have to say, from Calico about what they do. But I think what we're all facing right now is, for a lack of a better word, fatigue. The fatigue of this whole pandemic is maybe going to create another problem, and that is relaxing of your defense. And again, it's an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure. So let me go ahead. I'm going to share my screen here with the presentation. So Calico really is a multi-platformed approach to trying to allow a group of individuals, I'm going to just use Alaskan Brewing Co, for example, to have a monitoring program that accesses the technologies that are available in a way that creates a seamless communication and educational platform supported by laboratory testing. And that would be essentially an approach that does one thing, and that is, I think, creates more awareness on a company-wide basis in our case, and possibly more awareness on an individual basis. And I go back to that fatigue issue. Fatigue is what we have to overcome because we still need to wash our hands. We need to social distance, wear masks. So I'm not sure. So basically, what Calico does is creates a platform for organizations, and that can be as small as as a group of people working together as a company, or larger groups. They worked with universities. They worked with much larger platforms, and they create a way for each individual to do a self-assessment. Let's say on their iPhone or their Android, they'll get a list of questions asking them, have you had a sore throat? Have you been to a large gathering? And daily on each shift, our employees will be asked on a volunteer basis to answer these questions. They'll also have a digital thermometer, which they will take. Again, this is going to be a volunteer program. They're going to take their temperature, because the CDC protocols most recently have identified the fact that a rise in temperature is the primary indicator of the potential for having protracted COVID-19. As compared to influenza, flus usually start with a scratchy throat. But anyway, long story short is, again, what they'll do is be able to have our volunteering staff sit there and be made aware of certain attributes that are maybe news that would be appropriate for them to be aware of. And we'll be able to, in a real-time way, communicate with every staff member. The other issue that they're going to be able to utilize is, they call it an analog tracking, not a digital tracking, an analog tracking. The idea is that many people really do resent the fact that there seems to be a loss of privacy. And in the university settings, they had to overcome this with the student bodies, because the student bodies didn't like Google and Amazon knowing exactly where they had been for the last couple of days or a couple hours or a couple of minutes. So what they do, the Calico group will census all our staff, and we have broken the brewery up into 5 different siloed areas where we try to restrict interactions between them, so that if there is an outbreak, we can contain it and maybe mitigate it. But what they'll do is be able to sit there and do the census of understanding what part of the plant each of these individuals are in. So if there were to be an incident, we could then say, okay, these are the groups that we have to be very much more mindful of and follow up. Also, they're talking about proactive testing. They call it I lost the word, but the testing itself would be using PCR, which is the gold standard, but it's a fairly lengthy process to get the results back. 24 hours is great, 48 is okay, 72 is kind of long, 7 days is awful, but it is what it is. But they have a lot of that ability, and again, it creates an awareness within the company of who's been tested, what's the incident rate. So there'll be proactive testing, and they're using different platforms, whether it be antigen, antibody, and the PCR. They're still working on the antigen testing, but what we would be using is a series of different approaches. Again, I talked about the digital thermometer, and it's a smart thermometer in that it would be connected. We would be able to sit there and identify each of our groups of individuals, and whether we have one person who's starting to have a slight uptick in temperature. And we could do some proactive testing in regards to, he's maybe not hit the CDC protocol as far as what constitutes a rise in temperature, but we could be proactive and say, hey, you just had a 0.2 degree temperature rise in your temperature. Let's go ahead and get you tested out. Now, our platforms are going to be much more simple, because we don't have maybe some of the challenges that other possible users would have. They use, as an example, K through 12. K through 12, you have a whole bunch of students. Not all students are going to be able to afford an Android or an iPhone, let alone the fact that the kindergartners aren't going to be using them. So they have things like kiosks where people can have face recognition scanning of students coming in, and then a thermal profiling to see whether the person has a temperature. If that individual is leaving the school, same thing, it goes through the kiosk, and they'll be able to maybe interact with a little bit more, again, proactive, but also user-tailored equipment, and work with the school systems or other maybe groups to be able to utilize some of the technology they have. The other issue that, I don't mean to downplay the testing side. In working with the city and borough, looking at trying to find the right testing platform, it's complicated by the types of units being used and also the supply chain to support those testing platforms. What Calico has done is has a series of labs all over the country. So they have a geographic diversification, and they have a platform diversification. So they use the Thermo Fisher platform, the Panther platform, the Roche platform, the Abbott platform. And these are the platforms that the city is deciding to choose from, but we'll be only choosing one platform. And in reality, what Calico has is a number of platforms. Some of their labs test 16,000 PCR tests a day. So with the geographic and also platform diversification, if there was a supply chain issue or an outbreak, in a specific locale where that lab might then have to come offline because they're working with their own community. There is an ability for Calico to offer that testing in a little bit more of a secure environment, in that they have that diversity. The types of costs, there's a set of costs. They're looking at a $39 per user annual subscription. And what this would be is essentially creating that web-based platform along with all the various other types of HIPAA and high-tech protocols safeguarding individual user health data. But because there is an integration within the company, our staff are going to be asked to volunteer. This is not going to be a requirement of employment, but it's going to be a volunteer program. But there's the actual PCR testing, which again, it's not local, so we're going to have to be shipping this off to those various labs. So there might very well be delays. We also have the possibility of antibody and antigen testing. And I could dive deep into what those are. Really the ones that we're mostly focused on is the PCR test, which is the gold standard. Antigen test has some complications, but it is a less expensive and rapid test in that you could get the results within a half hour or even less time. So you get real-time data, and that's one thing that we're wanting to sit there and pursue and test, even though the CDC protocols have some reservations in regards to how it could be interpreted. The most important thing is knowledge and knowing what the test is telling you. It's not as definitive as the PCR, but it is much more rapid. So Calico as a company has dealt with many different platforms. So I've called a number of their references. Right now, they're managing over 100,000 individuals. We're looking at being essentially a beta test for them. We have to keep in mind that 8 months ago, nobody was thinking this was going to be needed. So how do you establish a track record? How do you prove up in 8 months that you can do something fairly profound? And that is the reason why we approached the assembly for some assistance. We're estimating that the costs for us is going to be fairly large because administratively, we're going to be having our staff interviewed and on the clock, doing the surveys, doing the self-monitoring. Our HR department's going to be engaging with the staff management. But here's an interesting member that I ended up talking to, the Southeast Alaska Guiding Organization. Obviously, they're dealing with the Medical College of Wisconsin, William & Mary, which is on the East Coast, George Mason University, Hampton City College. They're all over the U.S. But here was Southeast Alaska Guiding Organization. What they are is a group of 39 different clients, ranging from mom and pop six-pack holders, charter fishermen, to the Waterfall Group out of Ketchikan, which has hundreds of visiting guests. And in the spring of this year, they facilitated for that 39 client base, which had lots of visiting guests from out of state and lots of guides. And they facilitated daily testing that averaged 200 tests a day using PCR and a peak of 400. And just think of it. They did this in the spring of this year. They hit the ground running. So let me get back to my screen. So what we wanted to achieve is on our own basis, and actually we started this discussion with some of the on-premise retailers here in Juneau that have a shared group of service staff members. So there might be a bartender that has a job at one or two establishments, or a server that has a job in two different establishments. How do you create this modicum of understanding, siloing, and then response, proactive testing, proactive communication, to create a very complex, what would seem to be a very complex set of different businesses with a shared need to have a program that could, one, keep everyone engaged with self-awareness, two, help proactively make sure that we have the safest environment for our staff and for our customers. So I would say, is this going to work? Well, that is really, I think, the reason why the city had a piqued interest in supporting this program. There's going to be a lot of costs that are going to be borne by the individual companies, because there's going to be a lot of investment in time, HR, personnel. There are some hard costs, and therein lies hopefully some mitigation in the risks of establishing the IT platform that would then validate whether this company can do what they say. How could it be used? It could be used in the school setting, like I had mentioned. It could also be used maybe for the legislature, or maybe specific government offices. The thing is that there's no way in an 8-month period a company can establish a reputation that is fully vetted. So what a group of us have said is, we will be willing to invest and be essentially the guinea pigs. If it works and they exceed expectations or meet expectations, well, that's good data. If it doesn't work, and there's any number of reasons it might not work, well, that's good data, because if we're going to invest in this in a larger format for our school systems, or for the legislature, or for any larger format, it will be expensive, and it would be much preferable to invest in a real beta test here locally to see whether or not this can work. One possible way that this could fail: Alaska has a lot of very wonderful citizens, and I would say that we all appreciate where we live. And one of those appreciations is essentially the fact that we're independent, we have our privacy, and we have our space. Maybe our staff are going to say, we're not interested. I'm not plugging into the system. That's Big Brother. That's a failure that would be internally, something that we can't control. And that's good information. Yes, it would be money spent, and we will have invested a lot of our administrative staff time, but at the end, I think that's worth it. Worth it for us, because we want our staff to be healthy, and we want our business to remain healthy for the financial repercussions that would have on people's paychecks and our own community. We also want our community to maybe have resources that could be vetted and utilized, because really this is a long-term play. We all know that. So I appreciate the opportunity to sit there and present. Again, we're wanting to utilize ourselves as guinea pigs for the benefit of maybe finding out whether this type of platform could be utilized. And so I'm willing to take questions if there are any from the audience. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Geoff. Appreciate that. Some good information there. So we'll take some questions from our audience using the Q&A tab. Reminder, there's a Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. You type your question in there. We can get it to Geoff, and we'll get the best answer we can. So with that, somebody's asking if wondering if the kiosk would be helpful to install at the Capitol building, and how many. And I would add to that, how many of those would you need? I mean, how quickly can you run people through there without causing a big backup?
Okay, so, well, you all heard the question. I usually try to repeat the question, mainly for my own benefit, so that I can cogitate. Yeah, we did talk about that, and they say it's a 2 to 5 second turnaround. 2 seconds for face recognition, and then the thermal imaging will then give a response as far as what temperature that individual has. I think so that's the answer. It's fairly rapid, and you would need to have the kiosks where people are entering and leaving the building. So there might be a need and a protocol that this group, Calico, would recommend on how to sit there and do that. I'm envisioning in a school situation where you have 1 or 2 doors that all the kids come in. And the nice thing about this is, again, it's digitally based in regards to the temperature. So everyone's temperature is slightly different. So not everyone's going to be 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. But if somebody is typically 98.4 degrees Fahrenheit, and all of a sudden they come in with 98.8, that's almost a half a degree rise. That's remarkable. Now, again, in the school situation, it's maybe a little different. And I think one thing that I was impressed with in talking to them is their awareness of people's desires for privacy. So I would say probably, the question that would come to bear would be in the legislative world, there's going to be people that don't want to have that face recognition software. So there are probably going to have to be options where people can come in different ways based upon their desires. I did ask them whether or not, is there a threshold for success? If, is 25% participation at our brewery, is that a success? Or is it really 75% is the threshold? And interestingly enough, they said, well, frankly, any participation is better than none. And if you're putting in a program where you get participation, you are improving your environment. So I would say that in the applications at the Capitol, you look at the number of offices, the types of people you have. You have lobbyists, you have staffers, you have people that are constituents. So the thing that they're looking at, Calico is looking at, is each application is going to be slightly different. In our case, we have very specific silos at the brewery. We have the brew house, we have the canning line, we have the variety pack line, we have the administrative staff, then we have the business office, which is more accessible by the mail deliveries and the like. So we have very distinctive zones. In the Capitol's case, you have the governor's offices, you've got different commissioners, you've got different committees. Who do people interact with? If there is a outbreak with this one individual, who is his contact group? So what they try to do is create almost a pre-organized contact chain so that the response can be much more quick. Also, the communication platform is much more integrated because everyone has or all those that participate would have a smartphone that they could immediately realize, oh, I should go in and get a rapid test because XYZ person just got exposed. So one of the examples that I was given by one of the universities I called, they had a freshman class of 800 freshmen coming into the university, and a requirement for enrollment was participation in this platform. The faculty, it was a volunteer platform because the faculty could not be required to take this, but they had 112 faculty volunteer for participation. They broke down the freshman class into dorms. And so what they did is they customized it to each application. And therein lies the attribute that's, I think, of note. There's some experience that they have, even though, like I said, 8 months ago, no one was thinking about this. They have some experience in understanding and navigating the desire for privacy and the need to understand how do you map out the contact tree beforehand so that when something happens, you can respond quickly. They do what they call prevalence testing. That was the word I was looking for, prevalence testing. So they do asymptomatic testing on a random basis, maybe 4 to 6%. Part of that could very well be not purely random. So if somebody answers the question on their iPhone, hey, I did attend a funeral 3 days ago or 2 days ago, or I attended a funeral this weekend. Well, then they're going to sit there and look at that and say, okay, a larger gathering. This person obviously is probably going to be very, very aware because he's constantly thinking about it. So he's wearing a mask, he's social distancing, but he had a community gathering that he attended. So the software would say, okay, in day 5, we're going to do 4% prevalence testing within the company, random. But you know what? This guy is rise to the top. He's done something. There was a funeral. We're not going to stop funerals. Well, the random testing is going to select of this group, which one would be the most likely person that we would want to make sure we have follow through with. Boom, he'd be selected. He'd come in, do the PCR test, results would come back, and we'd go forward. So I just can't emphasize there are opportunities for success, but there are also opportunities for failure. And failure is wrought with negativity. Guess what? If it fails for us, I think that's good information for the city and borough and other possible users, because it's not going to be inexpensive. It's an investment, but I think we're postured for 2021, and we want to have a healthy environment. And let's face it, a lot of our day is spent at work, hopefully.
Right. Yeah, that's good information. So another question somebody's asking is, Mike wants to know, how close are you to implementing this? And now that you've got the approval from the assembly, what's your timeline at the brewery?
Our time, well, we have been working, or we have been talking to Calico for probably about a month and a half. And regrettably, I would have loved to have this in place a month and a half ago. Right now, we're working out the details on the contract. And I'm hoping that we will be instituting this I would hope, in the next 2 weeks, where we will be looking at the digital thermometer and the protocols as far as questions, getting our staff aware. We started about 3 weeks ago, talking to each individual member of our staff and canvassing and asking whether they would be interested and supportive of a program like this. We got overwhelming response that they would be. And like I said, this is a one-on-one discussions with every one of our staff members. But proof is in the pudding. When we come down to it, and we're going to ask them to do this, and it'll be on the clock. We're going to be doing some surveys. We're going to be telling them the types of questions we're going to have, and who will be privy to this information. And so it might very well be, we'll find out whether or not we're going to get this on step right away. But like I said, I would hope that we would actually be putting things in place by the end of October. You're on mute.
There we go. Shelley's asking, how successful was the Southeast Guidance Platform? And did they have, for example, did they have any cases? How many? And have you talked to them and asked them about their experience with it?
Yeah, I did. I talked to the director. So he oversaw basically the 39 clients, which ranged from very small operations to very large operations. And he said the Calico Group were very professional, very responsive. And obviously, the guiding window was just the summer season. And also they were just getting going. So the principles in Calico actually come from 3 different areas. One area is the clinical area. So I talked to the director of the Madison Diagnostic Laboratory, and I think he had mentioned they do 16,000 PCR tests a day. And the other principal that was in our conference calls was the IT platform head, John. And then the third party was a venture capital group who were basically financing this and trying to sit there and support and develop these types of programs. I would say the references I've gotten have been positive in as much as they've said, was it just absolutely slick, smooth as ice, not a problem, no glitches? Not. But empathize. This is 3-4 months after they decided to get going. And so they're learning on the fly. Now, we could wait for a year or two to get more data, but I don't think we have a year or two to wait. Time is of the essence. I would say I was heartened by the reference checking that I did. And I was also heartened by the learning that obviously came about from others like the universities using their platform. I hope I answered the question.
You sure did. You sure did. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions. I was just going to comment that it sounds like from what you were talking about, they've already got the ability. So if you put one of these facial recognition things in a school, or let's say you put them in all the schools, they'd be able to separate that out and go, this group is from DZ, this group is from Glacier Valley, and be able to isolate those populations within their testing universe. Is that right?
Correct. Correct. And yeah. And I'd say again, we go back to, yeah, that's absolutely right. The facial recognition is obviously much more high tech. You're profiling the individual's temperature profile, and then you can also be looking at if there's certain groups, whether it be they decide to have the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday student body, and then the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday student body. You can segment those two. If there's different classrooms, again, if all of a sudden one classroom, one first grade class, oh my goodness, 6 students have a half a degree higher temperature this day. I mean, the sophistication that can be employed, again, I don't know if this is how they're going to do it, but the sophistication could identify that this classroom seems to have a higher incident level. We need to think about this. We need to sit there and maybe be proactive here and clean the classroom, and then have everyone do a throat swab. I'd say the big aha moment I had was really it's about proactive work. In talking to the head of the Health and Social Services state of Alaska, when I engaged him and wanting to make sure that this type of program wasn't going to run counter or be not supported by the state. When I talked to our local COVID team here in Juneau, again, I engaged and asked, if we did something like this, how can we make sure that we're in step? The overwhelming support we got had to do with the fact that monitoring in their minds is probably the most important thing you can do. The temperature checks, the questions, because it does 2 things. It makes mindfulness a part of each individual's daily routine. So it's going back to what you said, Eric, at the beginning. Wash your hands, wear your mask, social distance. Yes, we're all tired and fatigued, and this really does not make for a great time. But we have to establish habits, and supporting those habits in a monitoring program, but also utilizing the data so that you can jump ahead rather than being reactive. It's more proactive investment than a reactive, oh no, we got a problem.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like you could definitely use it in that setting. You got a group that like you say has a rise in temperature. You could then go, okay, well, who else has been around that group? Who's within proximity of that group, and maybe proactively get ahead of that and get those groups into some sort of testing and be able to contain whatever you might have going on in that group. So anyway, I think that's all the questions we have. I don't see any more on there, but Geoff, I just want to thank you and the brewery for taking this on. I think it's a really complicated thing. I think that you guys are well positioned to test this out, for lack of a better term, for the rest of the community. And I hope that it works out the way we think it is. And like you said, if it doesn't, that'll be valuable information too. We won't have spent millions of dollars on something that doesn't work. So I think it's really neat that you guys are stepping forward to head this up, and especially you've done a lot of work on this. I know I've heard you talk about it several times. So I appreciate that. I know everybody else does too. With that, I don't think there's any other questions. Let me take one more look, make sure nothing popped up in there. Yep, we're just getting some thank yous from other people in there saying thank you. So there's a lot of thanks out there for what you guys are doing. So Geoff, thank you very much. And let's see, thanks for joining us today. And make sure you all register and join us next Thursday for our legislative forum with Representative Andy Story and Ed King. We'll have a good forum there, lots of questions to be asked and answered. So put that in your calendar. We ask you have a great day. Be safe, and like Geoff said, wear your mask and wash your hands. Thank you for joining us at the Chamber today, and we'll see you all next week. Good day.
Thank you very much.